Have you ever heard that for a long time, Black members of the church couldn't hold the priesthood or go through the temple? It's one of the hardest and most confusing parts of our history, and honestly, one of the saddest. But understanding how it happened, how it ended, and what the church teaches now helps us see that God's plan is always moving toward greater light. So let's dive in together. When the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints was formally organized in 1830, the idea of a worldwide church was radical. America was deeply divided over slavery, but the restored gospel taught that everyone is a child of God. That same year, November 1830, the first Black man joined the church. By 1836, a faithful Black Latter-day Saint named Elijah Abel was ordained to the Quorum of the 70 and later participated in temple ordinances. In 1840, the saints in Nauvoo looked forward to people of all races worshiping in the temple together. Joseph Smith seemed to believe in full equality before God. But after Joseph's death in 1844, something changed. At first, the then-future prophet Brigham Young seemed not to see color as an issue. While camped at winter quarters in 1847, he referred to a Black church member as one of the finest elders in Israel. However, over the following years, something changed drastically for Brigham as he traveled from winter quarters to Utah. 5 years after referring to a Black man as one of the finest elders in the church, Brigham Young stood before the Utah Territorial Legislature. He spoke against Black men being able to vote, and in the same speech announced publicly for the first time that Black men could not receive the priesthood as they were under the curse of Cain. This was a far cry from his statements in winter quarters, but he stood by what he said. Priesthood restrictions had begun, and they remained in place for 126 years. Though enforcement was not immediately universal across the church, and it was often open to interpretation, over time the policy became that any church member with any Black African ancestry, even a single ancestor, could not be ordained to the priesthood or receive temple blessings. Black Latter-day Saints could still be baptized, receive the Holy Ghost, attend church, and take the sacrament, but the highest blessings of the gospel, including sealing and temple ordinances, were withheld. The effects were painful and isolating. So here's the big question: why? The truth is, we don't know for sure. We currently don't have any record showing that Brigham Young claimed a revelation from God was the impetus behind the priesthood ban. And later prophets who continued the policy never left a clear explanation either. There are a few possible reasons it lasted so long. First, many church leaders may have assumed the ban was based on revelation since it came from an earlier prophet. Second, the racial attitudes of the 1800s and 1900s likely made the priesthood ban seem logical to most members. And third, attitudes about race and the priesthood were extremely strong, even at the general level of church authority, making the likelihood of a consensus one way or the other seem impossible. Whatever the reasons, it's clear now that this was one of the most difficult and painful chapters in church history. For more than a century, faithful Black members worshipped in the church even though they couldn't receive the priesthood or go to the temple. Can you imagine that kind of faith? They kept showing up, kept serving, kept believing, even without the blessings others enjoyed. Meanwhile, church leaders wrestled with the issues behind the scenes. In the 1950s and 60s, as the civil rights movement grew, questions about the priesthood restriction became louder. Many members, including leaders, wanted to know if the policy was truly God's will. President David O. McKay studied and prayed about it deeply. He felt that the priesthood ban was a policy, subject to change, and not a doctrine, which is eternal. But he also felt he hadn't received permission from the Lord to change it, despite pressure to do so. His questions and beliefs, however, opened the door for what would come next. When Spencer W. Kimball became prophet in 1973, the restriction still stood. But President Kimball couldn't stop thinking about it. He felt that previous prophets had sought the Lord's will on the subject, but for them, the time wasn't right. As President Kimball's son later said, the prophet wanted urgently to find out firsthand what the Lord thought about it. He spent countless hours in the temple praying and pleading, knowing that he couldn't force the Lord to give him a revelation, but strongly desiring one. He asked the 12 to fast and pray too. On June 1st, 1978, President Kimball met with the First Presidency and Quorum of the 12 Apostles in the upper room of the Salt Lake Temple. They prayed together, united in heart and purpose, and the Spirit came. Those in the room later said the feeling was so powerful, so undeniable, that every man there knew God had spoken. The priesthood restriction was to be lifted. On June 8th, 1978, a letter was sent to the entire church. It said, "He has heard our prayers and by revelation has confirmed that the long-promised day has come when all worthy male members of the church may be ordained to the priesthood without regard for race or color." Just like that, after 126 years, the door opened again for all of God's children. Today, the church has made its stance absolutely clear. The church's official statement says, "The Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints teaches that everyone is an equal child of God, regardless of race, ethnicity, background, skin color, or nationality. The Book of Mormon teaches that all are alike unto God." When we talk about the priesthood restriction, it's easy to focus on what went wrong. But we should also remember the incredible faith of Black pioneers who stayed true even when things were unfair. People like Jane Manning James, who walked hundreds of miles to Nauvoo and remained faithful for life. Or Elijah Abel, who served 3 missions even after his priesthood was questioned. Their stories are reminders that faith isn't dependent on what's easy or fair. Faith is dependent on a personal relationship with God and a determination to do His will, no matter how hard. Hey friend, I have been doing months and actually years of research to create for you an unofficial guide to tricky church history topics such as polygamy or seer stones or race and the priesthood. If you want to grab those, you can click the link in the description or I'll include a link right here.